Hello everyone, I'm going to be discussing introverted feeling in the first slot, the dominant function of the ISFP and INFP personality types. The judging functions are a bit more difficult to explain than the perceiving ones. Even Jung himself, in his chapters on feeling and introverted feeling in psychological types, he had a bit of trouble himself and admitted it that, they're a bit more difficult, but I'll try my best. A good way of looking at the feeling functions overall is as a system of values and ethics that really resonate well with axiology, this right-brained, heart-based, emotional intelligence that deals with values, ethics, morals, virtues, things like that. It's a good way of looking at feeling. Now, as far as FI specifically, some keywords would be self-expression, authenticity, ways of really looking within on an emotional level and through introspection to really understand who you are as a human being, and that deep emotional understanding of the self, of you. Some other keywords are creativity and identity. And it can be argued that FI is the most creative function in the sense that it really excels in the realm of art, speech, any sorts of right-brained activities, music, dance, drama, stuff like that. That's where FI really excels. And FI DOMs have this ability to, they always know when they're feeling, they know what they like, they know what they don't like, they know what they value, and that all works together to really understand why and why they do the things they do and who they are in the world. The last one I want to get into is listening and the ability to listen and to tune in, but I'll get to that a little bit later. As far as this FI-TE axis, a very simple way of looking at it is FI dealing with deep emotions that are experienced within, and TE as this cold, rational, logical way of bringing order, labeling things, categorizing things, and this ability to be assertive. And FI, because it wants to be boundless, because it wants to be free, because it wants to let those emotions swirl around inside them and really be connected to that sense of self, because it's how they process information and connect with the world. It has this ability to turn off TE, because what happens is FI, it processes information emotionally, and TE wants to categorize, it wants to label those emotions through words. It wants to say, FI, this is happiness, FI, this is joy, this is pleasure. And it can digest and process those emotions, but what happens is that the moment it does that, FI feels like it's being restricted, it feels like it's being confined, ossified, it doesn't like it. And it's not that FI DOMs don't ever think, it's just that this is the relationship between the first and the fourth. Another way of looking at it is like FI really excels at expressing itself through creativity and through art. So, for example, a poem, a painting, a musical composition. FI can express itself through those outlets, through that realm. However, without that structure, without that order that FI needs to, understand and send down to TE, you can look at it as just an example. Like poems, they need a language, they need structure, meter. Paintings need to be painted on the canvas. It needs boundaries, brush strokes, techniques. a song or music needs to be written in a key. It needs to be, musical scales, whatever. These two functions need to work together in order to really, this is what separates the great artists and masterpieces from just anything else. And so many FI DOMs were artists or are artists. And, this is just an example of what FI and TE can do when they work together in unison on that axis. Another example, and Jung uses this in his chapter on Introverted Feeling, is that still waters run deep. And I think this is a great analogy for FI because it really reflects what FI can do as a way of processing and judging information, much like TI can do, except TI is left-brained, FI is right-brained. So take this glass of water as a representation of FI, and say we have a very loud, obnoxious person that just, rah, 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 rah. He's barking, he's being rude, he's using vulgar language and just being obnoxious. It's really going to affect the FI DOM, much like if you throw something into a glass of water or flick the glass, it'll ripple, it'll be startled, Basically, FI gets vibes from other people and from other things, and this is a way of judging and processing information via emotions that occur from within on a very deep, complex level. This is why it's so hard to explain FI, because the moment you try and define it through TE or TI, then FI just slips away. It doesn't like to be confined in that way. And going back to this example, it's like FI, it has these antennas that can just pick up on someone's tone of voice, the language that they're using, body language, which is a huge one. All of this sorts of information FI can process and internalize by itself. And obviously when it's in the dominant slot, it's going to have a very deep and profound way of doing this. Just FI itself, this way of looking at it, it's almost intuitive in that sense. And if you're trying to explain to that someone to someone who doesn't understand MBTI or the cognitive functions or whatever, it's going to sound like intuition, just straight up. And I mean, it sort of is. It's not conceptual, it's just, it gets vibes from people that are processed from within. Another one would be like sympathy. So instead of a rude person, say that this is a very good friend of the FI DOM, and the friend is telling a story to them, and FI DOMs have this ability to listen, again, to tone of voice and body language, and they're really able to put themselves in another person's shoes and feel what it would be like for them to experience whatever the story is. And through sympathy, they are able to do that and introspect, get those complex emotions, relate them to other emotions that they've felt before. And it's just like this deep right-brained intelligence emotional system that really, it's hard to explain through, any sort of intellectual or left brain approach. It's something that needs to be felt, and like Jung said in his chapter on feeling, that once you experience FI and you get a general understanding of what it is, then it becomes easier to detect. But as far as defining it, it's always going to be kind of elusive in that sense. And as far as sympathy, it's not just about other people. Like FI can identify itself with causes, movements, activism, like bands, especially characters in a play or a movie or a book. FI DOMs have this ability to like look within, identify with that character, and this is what makes them very good actors and actresses, is because they can read a script of a play, and let's say they already got the part. FI has this ability to take a piece of themselves and put it in the character, even if it means changing the script a little bit, or changing what the director had in mind. The FI Dom actor or actress will completely own that part and like become that character through self-expression, through identity, through creativity, and they'll be authentic in that way. Alright guys, so this video is getting a bit longer than I intended, so I want to wrap it up by giving a quick comparison of FI and FE in order to better understand FI. So with FI, it's like a deep, complex, emotional, value-based system that's really connected with feelings and emotions. And with FI DOMs specifically, since it's their dominant function, it's almost as if they can experience two emotions at the same time, or even two conflicting feelings. And this is generally why they need a bit more time to really understand, process, and evaluate how they feel about a certain situation. FE, it's more outwards. It likes to connect with others. It wants to harmonize, be with the environment. It's kind of like wearing your heart on your sleeve, that sort of expression. And a good rule to follow with any introverted and extroverted function is that the introverted ones will be much deeper and more subjective, whereas the extroverted ones are more faster, more objective. Another way of looking at FI is it's more of a feline energy, whereas FE is more of a canine energy, in the sense that it's much easier for the average person to understand how a dog is feeling and what a dog needs and wants. It's like, okay, I want to be fed, I want to be played with, I want to go outside, I need attention, that sort of a thing. Whereas with cats, they're a bit more difficult to understand, and it's just kind of like they're more reserved, more private, they do their own thing, and they have their own ways of showing affection. FI, of course, is more sympathy, as I previously mentioned, and FE is more empathy. And a lot of FI DOMs will identify with the term of being an empath, and that's totally 100% okay. I'm just looking at FI through the lens of the cognitive functions and through typology. FI, it's more of the experience of feeling emotions from within, being able to put yourself in another person's shoes with emphasis on yourself. And of course, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to compare sympathy with empathy and saying that one's better than the other. They're just different, and they're different ways of feeling. And finally, you can think of FI as more of like a lunar energy, whereas FE is more solar, in the sense that, the sun, it's more in your face, more obvious, more giving, more blatant, whereas the moon, it's a bit more fickle, in the sense that it has its phases from waxing and waning. It shows only part of itself. There's that dark side of the moon, that mysterious part of it. It's kind of like FI DOMs, especially with their facial expressions, in the sense that they don't always match what they're feeling on the inside, and sometimes they can have these sort of weird or even inappropriate looks on their faces that don't really match the situation that they're in, and it can confuse other people. Okay, so let me just get rid of FE and finish with what I have to say. So going back and focusing on FI. So say this FI Dom is sleeping, for example, and they have a dream, and then they experience that dream, and then they wake up. What I've noticed is that FI really stands out in the dream world, in the sense that all the other functions, thinking, sensation, intuition, feeling, thinking doesn't really do well, in the dream world, because there's no logic. Sensation, you can have 13 fingers and 19 toes and everything's okay, you can walk through walls. Those two functions don't really do well with dreams. Intuition, it's all right. I mean, you can make those conceptual connections and meanings. It can get a bit weird, like if you're trying to do a Freudian analysis or something like that. But feeling it really shines in that way, and especially with FI. If you have a nightmare, for example, and you wake up, it's the feeling that lingers, and it's through that language of that right-brained intelligence, that feeling, especially FI and FI DOMs, having that deep understanding of themselves and being authentic to themselves, in the sense that they understand even where they are in a dream, emotionally on that level, that even when they wake up, that feeling lingers. Kind of like the Cranberries song, a very FI song, but it lingers, and it's almost as if like they've got one foot still in the dream world and one foot in reality, and FI is that bridge between both worlds. And that's something that like really only FI can do. And it's something that, I've talked to FI DOMs, and like they really experience dreams on another level, especially if they're lucid dreaming. And this is why FI is such a difficult function to explain and define and pinpoint. It's very mysterious and ethereal, and even intuitive in the modern sense, especially with vibes and the ability for FI DOMs to really pick up on energies of other people and other things, and identify themselves with. But yeah, FI, it's pretty difficult to explain. I tried my best, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.